Good morning and welcome to another episode of Recipe for Success. My name is Nancy Giacalone, and if this is your first time joining the show, the point of this podcast is to combine my love of cooking with my love of business and personal things. In other words, what does it take to succeed in whatever challenge that you're facing? One thing that I have found over the years is that everything has one thing in common, and that is there's always one key ingredient or technique to your success. So I like to talk about that. And today I am being joined by Efrat Cohen with ProPostureUS. So I hope I pronounced your name correctly. I've been practicing, but then I always get guests on here and I'm like, oh, I just mauled their name. So I hope I got that right. But welcome, Efrat. Let's kick it off by introducing yourself and telling our audience a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So correct. My name is Efrat Cohen, otherwise known as Effie. And the company name is ProPostureUS because
I got it wrong.
Has turned preposterous. And that's how that name came about. So a little about myself. I'm an experienced physical therapist. Of course, that's why I take notice of people's posture. And what turned me into my own business owner with this company name is that I've worked with people from different settings, different work settings, different age groups, and I've noticed that at the end of the day, there's something wrong with the posture that's affecting them and the work that they do, the learning that they're doing, the dancing that they're doing, sports that they're involved with. No matter what it is, at the end of the day, it revolves around their posture. And so the company came about, and therefore I work with people in different work environments, school environments, or individuals who are having some sort of issue or want to prevent an issue from happening.
I love that. So posture is something my mom drilled into me at a very early age. I'm 5'8", so I'm not tall, not short, but back in the day, that was actually considered fairly tall. And she always drilled it into me to be proud of your height and to stand tall and to sit tall. So even to this day, I think I probably have better than average posture. Maybe not perfect, but I do have pretty good posture. So I definitely understand why I understand the importance, because I always feel that if I slouch down even just a little bit, boy, I can feel the difference in my whole body. So that's wonderful. So let's take a step backward and talk a little bit about your education, because it's very prestigious, and your prior work experience in some of New York's premier hospitals. I'm very fascinated by that. I'd love to hear about some of the challenges that you encountered and why that kind of directed you to addressing posture.
Sure. So I did work for two of the hospitals, NYU Langone Hospital for Special Surgery. I worked with various age groups, various diagnoses. As I mentioned before, if you look at their overall common theme, always related to posture. Now, understand, what does posture mean? When people say posture, they think of how they're sitting or how they're standing. It's actually any way your body assumes a position is called posture. So that's why I said it affects anything and everything that we do. And so as a physical therapist, I'm always looking for the out-of-the-box, coming edge, something new treatment to help people. If something didn't work, let's think of a new way to help them. And so when I was looking at those coming from the corporate world, they did really well in the PT gym. And then when they went back to work to their workstations, their symptoms came back. So something obviously wasn't working. So even though they were doing well in the PT gym, and I know that they're working out in a gym or participating in a yoga class, Pilates class, what have you, something happened with taking that information and what was happening to them as they were engaging in their workstation. And so for them, I created a workstation program, and it worked. So when I went on my own, this is exactly what I do. I go on prior to COVID, and now with COVID online as well, engaging employees at their workstation. So whether they're sitting or whether they're standing or whether they're in a creative workspace, whether they're using a laptop, whether they're using PC with their monitor, or they're using their cell phone or even their watches now, the last thing we all think about is our posture and our body mechanics. And so when you start your day off with poor posture, you fatigue quicker, you develop discomfort and pain, then you're absent for your medical appointments, then you're disengaged, and then you don't want to do what you're doing. So why not engage your employees and retain them and give them tools that they actually can use wherever they're working? And that's the beauty of the program. You learn about this most important piece of equipment and tool, which is yourself. And the strategies and the tips and the exercises, you take that with you. So you learn about yourself and how you move your body, which most of us don't even think about how we do any of that. And that's why you got those messages from your mom. And by the way, I'm also 5'8". You can't tell on, video calls how tall everybody is, how they position themselves. But people don't think about how they use their body until something happens. They're like, oh, I'm in pain. Well, how did you do that particular activity? I don't know. And so the great part of it as being a physical therapist is that you get to teach people about themselves and how they move, and then how they can move better to improve whatever they're doing and to not have those symptoms. And so that's kind of how this whole program came about, and the unifying theme of posture. So no matter how old a person is or what their diagnosis is, our goal is to improve their posture and how they move their body, and sort of to relate to them, whether they're a child and learning to walk for the first time, or they're someone older who may have had a brain injury, what have you, or a sports injury, or just from the day-to-day and end up with some back pain, to learn about themselves, how they move, and how to move better. And that when they move better, they get stronger and they reach their goal to what they want to do and what's stopping them from what they're doing.
I love that. So one of the things, and we'll get into this a little bit more, but I know that you do, you mentioned about taking the program and the exercises back to the workstation, but something that I've read about quite a bit is the problem with text neck, and that because of the weight of a person's head, that's doing a lot of damage to their neck and their spinal cord. So do you have any thoughts on that? I mean, I'm just throwing that out there to you off the cuff. But
yes, it's actually a very common question. So I'm going to take it just a little step back and a bigger picture. So when we use technology, when we say we don't think about our posture, yes, we can go into a waiting room or, walking down the street, watching people on public transportation, wherever they are, their head is bent and they're engrossed in a tablet, a cell phone, what have you, and they don't think about it. And that's why I call that tech neck. But there's more to it. It's actually the whole body is in sort of this bent position, and it starts with the head and everything kind of follows. And what we don't realize is that whatever we do with that technology, or whatever we do whenever we're working and we're bent over, we take that same posture once we stand up and move around. And so for people who are then starting having balance problems with their walking and tripping, or their golf game isn't so great, or whatever they're involved with isn't so great, is because the postures that we use during the day affects what we do after work when we're not working. So that tech neck that you talk about, it's just the beginning. That's what you see because everyone's head is down.
Right.
It really encourages this whole bending, or what we call flexing, in the body. And so unfortunately, just keep bending something that's supposed to be more erect. And yes, you're going to have the weight of your head. And is it going to affect your neck? Yes. And is it going to put added stress to your spine? Yes. And then will you end up having some sort of symptoms? It may not be pain. It could start as fatigue. It could start as discomfort. Yes. So you kind of get into that cycle.
That's just so interesting, because I don't think that most people think about it at all. And it's great that you're bringing this to people's attention and giving them, practical tools to help address that.
Mm-hmm.
So when you take these programs into the workplace, let's say an employer decides, hey, we're going to sponsor, I don't know, either a one-time thing, or we're going to do a series with our employees because we know that, they're on their technology all day long and we want to give them the support. What kind of reaction do you get from employees? Is there resistance? Are they happy about it? What do you see?
They're usually very excited about it, and they wonder, wow, how'd they find you? We need you. Because it gives them an opportunity to take a step back and say, hey, this has been doing my work. You're right. I could do my work much better with these strategies and these exercises. So the program is catered to the workstation. So it's sort of like telling the employee, well, this is how you like to sit. How about try this strategy? This makes you sit more upright. And if you're having a hard time keeping that position, try this exercise at your desk, and that will strengthen your muscles so that you can sit upright and that you can correct your posture, so that you could refocus. And especially when we're under stress, Nancy, we go into stress postures. And this past year or so has been extremely stressful between COVID and the political environment. And so we have your own workload. And in addition to all these things, and working with family side by side in the house and finding that quiet space so that you could do these types of video presentations. And then your shoulders start creeping up. And then
Right.
you start putting that weight into your workstation. And so what you have is a lot of stored stress. And so when you have this program, employees not only feel that they're like, wow, I could do more work, but I could actually get out of the stress. So when you de-stress, not only is it a psychosocial discussing, thinking about how you think about things, but also that physical manifestation and getting yourself out of those positions so that you can refocus and de-stress.
That's very cool. Anybody that knows me knows I love my Peloton, and I love the coaches on there too. But one of the things that they often coach you about is to drop your shoulders, and they always say, "Are your shoulders creeping up to your ears?" And I'll be like, it's such a like just that little cue. You
Mm-hmm.
don't realize it until somebody says it, and you're like, "Oh, that feels so much better." So that's it. It does take, it's crazy the way that your body reacts to stress, exercise, trauma, technology. So I love that you're promoting this. I also read that you've created programs not only for the workplace but also for school and youth and parents. So tell me a little bit more about what you're doing there and why that's so important in that environment as well.
Yes. So I call our schools and our children, there are like mini corporations, but kids are born today with a cell phone in their hand. There's not a baby who doesn't know how to use it. Sometimes there are grandparents who ask their grandchildren to help them out with technology because that's just the nature of how they're being exposed and raised. However, they don't really think about how they use technology. And so my concern is that they're on a quicker, faster trajectory to having the symptoms that most middle-aged people complain about at a much younger age. And they are finding that kids are having issues that normally would present themselves later in the 30s, 40s, now happening in their late teens and early 20s. Why? Because of these issues. They're spending a lot of more time on technology. They're not thinking about their posture and their body mechanics. So we have, if you want to start young, you want to teach them how to use them in healthy ways and that they should be aware of how they're using their body because they're going to need their body for a lifetime. And so the program helps teachers and parents foster and facilitate healthy use of technology, how they're using their laptops or their PCs or tablets, what have you, in their educational setting. But it also helps parents and teachers screen the students. So if they see a child who's demonstrating poor posture, figuring out if something else may be going on with them so we can make them a more effective student. So just like my concern is we want to make our employees most effective and productive, the same goes with education. You want to make students the best learners and most productive as a student. And so the program helps both parents and teachers because they're learning about themselves too. But again, the students will now learn how to be better students with the use of technology, which is important because now we see technology is very much part of the educational experience. And sometimes it is the educational experience because of what's going on around us.
Yeah, certainly for the last year and a half or so, it has been the primary, focus of their education.
Mm-hmm.
What about with relation to when you talk about youth? What about like video games? How do you see that impacting posture, or do you see that as part of the problem as well?
Yeah, so I think video games and social media, I mean, you're spending a lifetime on technology for, programming, kids' educational programming. I mean, they're just using different types of devices for whatever purpose, including the video gaming. Again, you want to teach them how much time they're spending using that technology and giving them appropriate breaks. Same like I would advise with employees, how much time they're spending sitting, especially when they're working remotely. We find that they're sitting longer hours, more than they are sitting in the office. Same thing would go with video games. But again, how they play their video games, yes, you could talk to them about their posture, but they're not just playing video games. It's also the social media.
Oh yeah, no, I just was referring to that specifically. Social media is I definitely agree with you.
Yeah.
So interesting enough, we became connected through a mutual friend on LinkedIn. And one of the things I've learned about you that I think is so cool is I like to call you a super connector. You have really embraced networking and making connections throughout the pandemic when we had to do business differently. So tell me a little bit about how you kind of started that and what you've seen as far as the benefits go, because I always think the more you give, the more you get. And you are definitely a giver.
Thank you. Yes, I really enjoy networking. So COVID, I think I woke up maybe a month after COVID started, we'll say like April, and said, hey, haven't been networking in a while. Let's see what's available. And kind of reached out to some people that I've met in past networking events and started this sort of great cycle connection of visiting a group, meeting people in the group, asking them, you know, do you recommend another networking group or someone who's a great networker? And just the ask, simple ask, like, hey, you know, another networking event. And so through those questions, you sort of develop and create your own sort of networking group. And I think what's great about it is I really enjoy introducing people, you know, and meeting you, for example, Nancy, I think this was the power of LinkedIn because somebody who I met and I saw a comment you made, I said, oh, Nancy, I liked your comment. You know, I love to see more things that you post or connect. And what happens over time is that you start that process, but if you're not on social media all the time, you forget your next step. And what happened, which was great, someone just asked me, do you know people on the West Coast? And I said, yes. I said, I'm going to do something that, and I said, is there anyone in particular? I said, yes, if you didn't mind, I checked through your LinkedIn and these are the list of people. And one of them was you. And I said, yes, I wanted to connect with her myself. So after I made the introduction for that person, what I did was I said, Nancy, we need to speak.
I love that. I mean, that's what makes LinkedIn effective. If you're just on there reading people's posts, but you're not interacting, it's just really not serving the purpose that it was created for. And for me personally, the majority of my meaningful connections and people I would have never met otherwise have come as a result of LinkedIn. So I love it. And I really, I mean, props to you for making the connection and being proactive and reaching out, because not only are you here right now, but I already have like a list of my employers that I want to connect you with. So, you know, it's a wonderful thing. Okay. So as all of my LinkedIn lives go, I kind of zig and zag. So now we're going to zag again. And you're clearly connected with the healthcare system. You have been when you worked in the hospitals, not quite so directly now, but what has been your biggest frustration with dealing with the system as it is now? And what have you found that works well for you?
So I'd say in the scope of the world of prevention, I think we're more in the crisis mode. So if someone has a problem, then we'll deal with it. But if they are pre a problem, we're not yet there in terms of in the prevention scope. So we have to have a problem. And if you're a physical therapist or if you're someone who went through physical therapy, you know that there's certain criteria in order to have physical therapy. Number one is pain. There has to be pain. But there are people who have disabilities or issues or post-op that the pain isn't their primary problem, it's weakness.
Sure.
And so it's sort of, what about these other scenarios? And then you spend a lot of time speaking to insurance companies and saying, this was a very complicated surgery. You know, this was very, you know, pain. They're not talking about pain, but they can't use their foot because sometimes people don't feel pain, or the terms of feel, very interesting word. Most people have a hard time when you say, can you tell me how that feels? Well, what does feel mean?
Yeah.
And you always,
okay.
Right. And it's an abstract for a lot of people. I don't, you know, how does this feel? Like, all right, don't worry. Most people don't have that understanding of feel. And so from my end, it's when you have certain criteria. And what do you do when the person doesn't fit that criteria, but has an issue? How can we describe it for you? So there are functional skills, which are okay. But sometimes nothing, you know, fits because it's sort of a generic scale, you know, and, you know, when they say walk a mile, let's say walking a block is a big milestone. What are we supposed to do? That's a big deal, you know? And so how do we capture these things? How do we capture them? And those, you know, yes, you should have good, great goal writing, what have you. But in terms of a healthcare provider, sometimes things don't fit these generic templates. And what are we going to do about it? And what are you going to do when someone doesn't fit an exact profile? And yes, they may have cardiac disease, but something else may be going on, you know, and sort of thinking out of the box and capturing somebody. It sometimes doesn't fit the mold when we're dealing with sort of healthcare reimbursements, what have you, what to do, what will our challenge be?
Yeah, I now know somebody I need to connect you with. Her name is Priscilla Romans, and she runs a patient advocacy company, and she's amazing. But I definitely need to connect you. Okay, so we have made it to my 5 burning questions. So everybody gets asked this question regardless. because it, of course, ties in with my love of food. So what is your absolute favorite food in the world, and can you cook it?
My favorite food is cereal. And you don't need to cook it. And everybody knows it's just part of my personality. It's sort of like I eat it. It's kind of like getting a drink after work. You know, you're going through some difficult, just have that bowl of cereal. It's not breakfast. It's not lunch. It's sort of just that comfort food is a good bowl of cereal. And the cereal changes all the time. And it's just like a comedy. Everybody knows if they open my pantry door up, it's going to have multiple boxes of cereal over there.
Now, I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. You're the first person that's given me that answer. So do you have like a top 3 cereals, just out of curiosity?
Yes. Currently, it would be Crispix, and sometimes with a little bit of Cocoa Pebbles as fun. It changes. It just changes by taste. But, you know, it's a lot of fun. Even one time, you know, for fun, I know Honeycomb changed the recipe because something tasted strange. And I said, you know what? I'm going to try to call, you know, I kind of was inspired by my nephew because, you know, they go through this in teenage years. They're all advocates. Like there's something wrong with the consumer. They learn about it. I happened to place the call, and it was a great call. I learned about how they test the products and who's responsible for a particular recipe. And I said, this is great. Thank you. I just want to let you know something's changed. I may not be the only person noticing it. And the good news is several months later, I get this package. And in the package is they went back to the old recipe and a coupon for another box. And it does help. So if you're not happy with the product, you can place the call. And it was just me. It was just a laughable moment on a Friday when I was eating. I said, this just doesn't taste good.
That's great. I love that story. Okay.
It works.
So I will remember that. If the cereal tastes different, I just make a call. Okay. So what is the one character trait you admire most in other people, and why?
I would say it's their goodwill. It's the people that just you watch their actions, they're selfless, they're generally giving. And I think commendably what I found during networking this past year and a half is meeting individuals. They'll hear about your business and they're soliciting advice because they just want to give good advice. There's no ulterior motive. This is just who they are, and their advice is priceless, and you appreciate it, and you too then start feeling that giving. And I love watching people who just give and like, wow, I wish I could just be even more giving. And so I think it's a great quality. It happens with networking. Anything that you do, I think the more you give, the return is just priceless.
I second that thought. So what's the one character trait that you're most proud of that you possess?
I would say listening. I've learned over time, if you listen, you eventually come to some sort of solution to whatever it is. If you listen to your clients and you hear what they need, they'll just refine with the work that you do. If you listen to your colleagues, just keep working on the listening, and then you'll come to the changes that are necessary, either to refining your product, refining your character, how you interact with them. I think the listening at the end of the day, that would be it. I just keep working on my listening. Sometimes the actions take a time, but just I like the listening.
So my dear friend Tanya Boyd just tuned in. She's in Texas, and she said selflessness, which we've described on both sides. So I love that very much. Okay. So if you could magically get everybody to do one thing to improve their overall posture, what would it be and why?
It always starts with your feet. So for everyone who is sitting now watching, put your feet flat on the floor. Most of us sit, our feet are either on the table, some part of the chair, on your toes, out in front of you. Just put them flat on the floor. It will be so much more easy for you to correct yourself than when they're not on the floor. So if you start with your feet, I would just say everyone just starts with your feet. Put your feet down. This is the time that you can put your foot down.
Okay, my feet are down. I have a bad habit of crossing my legs. So only one foot is on the floor. So, okay, feet on the floor. I will keep that in mind.
Get used to that feeling, because then after a while you're like, yes, I can now sit better. It gets you out of that initial, I think when you concentrate under stress, those feet do all sorts of interesting things. You're on your toes, they cross. So having them flat would be your first step.
Okay, my feet are flat. What is your secret talent or something people would be surprised to learn about you?
I would say it's in the writing world. I think because most people know me as a healthcare provider or socially, but in terms of the writing, they don't always get to meet the writing. And so I think when they start realizing I can write, I can, and rhyme, I think that's probably something that they just don't associate myself with what
So
I do
you
with
write
writing.
and you rhyme. So it's rapping next. I feel like that would be the natural progression.
I have rapped for some high school projects. We have
Okay.
to present that information. Yes, it's
Okay.
always enjoyable. I just think it's the play on words. Being a physical therapist, you need to have a sense of humor, and it can be corny, and we are corny. Anything to get yourself to laugh and your client to laugh, or your client's just laughing because you're laughing at yourself, that type of thing. But I would say it's in the writing.
I love it. And for anybody that doesn't know this, Effie has been published in several medical journals. I did read that. So you definitely have that as a skill. Okay, last question is, who have you connected with on LinkedIn that you would most like to meet in real life? Or if it's not on LinkedIn, maybe a podcast host that you follow. So who would you most like to meet and why?
I think it's a great question. I think about it a lot. And I think my answer might surprise you. I think I want to meet all those people who like to solicit us on LinkedIn. I want to know what the mindset is, and that if you walk up to a total stranger, because this is not my character, and I think maybe I should meet them because maybe I don't know, maybe you can learn. I think you always can learn something from people, but just randomly, we should connect. And then the following message is, I could help you.
Yeah. And you know nothing about me.
No, exactly. And so I think I want to meet the solicitors. I want to know the mindset, the strategy. It is such a complete different strategy than myself. So I think that would be fascinating to me. There are some other people that are fascinating. I could tell you one interesting thing is that I think when I started getting more involved in LinkedIn, I looked at people's writings, how they engage, and the number of contacts. And there's one person that looked so fascinating, and it was really funny because I think their profile was not necessarily built by themselves. And I think for myself as a business owner, when you build your own business and you learn about all aspects of your business, doesn't mean you can do all of it. I think you have to know your limitations, but knowing all of that. And for this person, this was not part of their building of a business. Someone else did it. So when I was asking some questions, it's like, I don't know. I have all these connections, but I don't know all of them. It's like, oh, this is so interesting. So it's a different take. Sometimes you want to meet those people as well, collecting lots of connections and not knowing all the people you connect with. Sometimes there's a rhyme and a reason. So I think those are two fascinating things I find on LinkedIn, is having lots of connection. And do you know or have an idea, like, is there a theme to your connections? Not that you have to know them personally. And then the solicitors, that's the most fascinating to me. So.
Yeah, the solicitors are an interesting breed. And if I'm feeling particularly spicy on a given day, I will type them back. I'm like, how do you know you can help me? And it's a bot or somebody that's, a VA that's working for them. Because of course, then they're like, I don't know how to respond to that. So it's most of the time I ignore them, but every once in a while I just want to test them. I'm like, come on, show me what you've got. So,
and I'll admit, I am guilty sometimes. I will just solicit right back, and I'll say, that's just so, why are you doing that? But I just had to, sometimes you just feel like, I'll give it a try, see what happens. But
I know, it's funny. Well, thank you so much. Are there any parting words of wisdom? And also please share with our audience how they can best get in touch with you.
Sure. So parting words, become observant of why you do what you do. And so, of course, if you have symptoms, that is a great question, but just think about it. If you're feeling tired or something's just not working out for you, if you're feeling stressed out, just look at yourself at that particular moment and say, I'm in this position. Why? And once you start thinking about it, then you can start making the changes. It's hard to make a change when you're not aware that you're doing something. And sometimes it just takes someone else to look at you. You could ask someone to take a picture of what you're doing, or just stop yourself and say, how did I get into this position? And then that will help you make your changes in terms of if it's your workstation or fun activity that you like to do or things that are challenging for you. You just start off with the why. It's like, how did I get to this? How? Why? And then in terms of reaching out, ProPostureUS. Now you know the name because people's posture is preposterous. And you can reach me, and Nancy will feel free to share my email contact, phone. I'll be more than happy to have a discussion with you. And if you want to solicit, this should be very interesting as well.
I saw you on Nancy's podcast and thought I'd see if you needed some Bitcoin.
But think
So
about it this way. If you are a business owner, this is a great opportunity to connect with your employees, especially now that they're working remotely or hybrid of home and the office. If you're an educator, this is a great program to help yourselves as educators as well as your students. And if you're an individual and you just want to improve something that you're doing or you're finding you have challenges, feel free to contact as well. The goal is to help you do what you want to do as best as you can and make you the best employee, employer, student, just yourself. It's all in your posture.
I love it. Well, thank you so much. I will put Effie's contact information in the comments after the show has closed. And I would just like to thank you once again for coming on. And to everyone else, I hope that you have a great week, and I will see you next Thursday.